Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. Okay. I don't know. Take any meaning you want from that. I can't really think of any. 24. I mean, if you're playing a lottery with a 24 in it, it's unlikely that this is going to help you hit the big jackpot, I guess. You need some other numbers, I would think. Anyway, late start, I guess, to proceedings here today. I don't know. I fell behind somehow, and so I'm sitting here with an untouched coffee. And, of course, no expectation that there will be anyone else on the air to help me mute the microphone while I sip at it. So I don't know. Maybe we'll all enjoy a little bit of coffee along with me this morning. Lots to get to, as always. Plenty to pick up on. Lots of things I've parked in pocket watching the social media flow this morning. And let's see. I guess the story most frequently discussed so far this morning. I don't know. Is this really a service for me to tell you these things? Anyway, I don't know. This is what I want to talk about anyway. Let's see. It turns out that The Guardian has news that I guess all Republicans are killing pets all over the place, which, once again, every Republican accusation is a confession. Oh, my God, the Haitian immigrants are something, something, something. Oh, actually, we're doing that. We're killing our neighbors' pets. I didn't, I hadn't put that together. This morning, it is or I guess one of the very many, although this is the chief wackadoodle, behind Project 2025, which Donald Trump totally has nothing to do with and has never heard of before in his entire life. It is Kevin Roberts, another creepy-looking jackass from the Republican side. Project 2025 mastermind allegedly told colleagues, he might have been lying, but why would you lie about something like that? Told colleagues he killed a dog with a shovel. What that dog was doing with the shovel, I don't know, but obviously was threatening his life, and he felt the need to kill it, probably with a machine gun. He actually killed it. He was the one wielding the shovel. It is revealed, it says here, in the subheader, former colleagues claim Kevin Roberts told them he killed a neighbor's pit bull around 2004, which I can't imagine would otherwise ever really be a story, except that one, Kevin Roberts now becoming something of a notorious figure with Project 2025. And by the way, yesterday was an interesting round in the early morning. I guess I should have gotten to some of those pieces. I'll see if I can dig them up. But people talking about, by the way, it is kind of amazing that Project 2025 became such a big deal in the campaign. As somebody else put it on social media, they're saying, you can't get anybody to pay attention to a campaign white paper ever. How did this become a central issue in the campaign? And crediting a couple of people, only one of whom I actually remember, which was John Oliver, because I saw it. That's how you remember these things. If you're me, doing a report on it in his show, what is it, last week tonight, and letting bringing it to, I think, popular attention. But there also, and this one I didn't see, was a woman who's, because I didn't see it, I don't remember. I should go dig up the article. That's the way I'll do it. But a famous celebrity at a big awards show who said, hey, you got to look out for Project 2025. And that surely did quite a bit to publicize it as well. And then kudos being passed around as, now I remember. I think it was someone was saying you should be thanking Don Moynihan for paying attention to Schedule F, the Schedule F portion of Project 2025 many, many months ago. So lots of people responsible for making Kevin Roberts something of an evil celebrity. And then I guess as people who realize, hey, I actually know that creepy dude, and he is creepy. And not only that, but one of the creepy things he did was brag about killing his neighbor's pets, which just now is a hot topic. And so They come to people like the Guardian's Stephanie Kirschgassner, who writes this up for us and gives us the details. The man behind Project 2025, the man, I guess, the right-wing policy manifesto that includes calls for a sharp increase in immigrant deportations if Donald Trump is elected or otherwise seizes power, told university colleagues about 2 decades ago that he had killed a neighborhood dog with a shovel because it was barking and disturbing his family, according to former colleagues who spoke to The Guardian. And of course, not even a particularly good reason to kill a dog if you can come up with one. You know, I'm being attacked, whatever. And usually, I believe they did mention it was a pit bull. And you might think, pit bulls have that reputation, fairly or not, of being, or getting caught up in a lot of press reports claiming that they're very aggressive dogs. And sometimes they are. So you might think, oh, he was defending his family. But this dog was just barking, which, annoying as it is a thing that dogs do. Anyway, Kevin Roberts, now the president of Heritage Foundation, is alleged to have told colleagues and dinner guests that he killed a neighbor's pit bull around 2004 when he was working as a still relatively unknown history professor at New Mexico State University. What an interesting career trajectory. My recollection of his account was that he was discussing in the hallway with various members of the faculty, including me, that a neighbor's dog had been barking pretty relentlessly and was, keeping the baby and probably the parents awake, and that he kind of lost it and took a shovel and killed the dog. End of problem, said Kenneth Hammond, who was chair of the university's history department at the time. So I guess his boss at the time. And it's an interesting way of putting it. I think he means that he was disturbing the baby and probably also Kevin Roberts. But it's an interesting way of putting it, though. Keeping the baby and probably the parents awake, meaning Roberts or who? Who are the parents of this baby? I don't know. Very weird. Also, a lot of times faculty tend to sort of live in close proximity to the university, and very often they are one another's neighbors. But I don't know, maybe not in this case, or maybe, who's part of the chemistry department? Screw those guys. I don't know why this passes without remark at the time. But 2 other people, a professor and her spouse, recall hearing a similar account directly from Roberts at a dinner at his home. 3 other professors also said they heard the account at that time from colleagues who said they had heard it directly from Roberts. None recall Roberts, who worked at the university as an assistant professor from 2003 to 2005, along an illustrious career with the University of New Mexico. Never recall him saying that the dog he allegedly said he killed, was actively threatening him or his family. In a statement for The Guardian, Roberts denied ever killing a dog with a shovel. He did not answer questions about why. Several people say he told them that he had. It's an interesting question. Why do you think everybody thinks that you killed a dog with a shovel? I don't know. And I also sometimes wonder, these guys love to parse things. And, I wonder if he was standing there saying, a dog with a shovel? I never killed a dog with a shovel. That dog never had a shovel in his life. But I do wonder sometimes why they bother. We sometimes wonder about that, but I don't know why we think that they would bother to try to find something that was technically true versus just untrue. They love to lie, so I'm not really sure why anybody would go through that exercise. But okay, in a statement to The Guardian, he says he denies doing it and doesn't know. He has no answers for questions about why so many people say he did do that or said he did that. This is a patently untrue. I always wonder about that pronunciation. We got to settle this, but it must be 2 alternative pronunciations: patently, patently. Patently untrue and baseless story backed by zero evidence, or zero evidence, possibly. Who knows? Anyway, in 2004, a neighbor's chained pit bull attempted to jump a fence into my backyard as I was gardening with my young daughter. Well, that's why it's chained. Thankfully, the owner arrived in time to restrain the animal before it could get loose and attack us. And it did, I guess, not get loose. So, I don't really know. I mean, he's trying to drum up some physical danger about it, I guess, but why, given that he's denying that he killed anything? Anyway, the people who say they heard Roberts talk about killing a dog at the time said that they found his apparent admission to be unsettling. I think he was going for that. And said they did not ask Roberts, who as a conservative Republican was already seen as something of an outsider among the university's mostly liberal academic staff, to provide any more detail about the incident. I think that probably people were not eager to engage with him over this. It sounded like a pretty crazy thing to do, and people didn't want to get into it at that point, Hammond said. And I wonder how the subject even came up. We're so tired because the neighbor's dog was barking all night and kept us awake. Oh, that happened to me once, and I killed the dog with a shovel. Oh, really? Yeah, I'm a very tough guy. You know, that sort of thing. Anyway, news of Roberts' alleged comments to colleagues comes as Trump, they helpfully note all of this is good, it's good context, the Republican nominee for president, that is also helpful context, and his running mate J.D. Vance have engaged in, as they just come right out and say it in The Guardian, a racist and false propaganda campaign to demonize Haitian immigrants living in Springfield, Ohio, by claiming that they have been killing and eating people's pets. The xenophobic claims, which are probably meant to strengthen support among white, racist, and anti-immigrant voters, it's right there, have incited multiple bomb threats that have disrupted the Springfield community. Project 2025, which was written by the Heritage Foundation under Roberts' watch, has become a focal point of the 2024 presidential election as Democrats warn that its radical policy prescriptions, such as the eradication of the Department of Education and imposing further restrictions on abortion, will serve as a blueprint for Trump's administration if he is elected. Both Trump and Vance have sought to distance themselves from the 900-page report, with Trump claiming he had not read it. That is not a way of distancing yourself from it if you're Donald Trump, but okay. But in a foreword to Roberts' book written by Vance, the vice presidential nominee praises Roberts' depth and stature with the American right and says that in the fights that lie ahead, these ideas are an essential weapon, like a shovel. Roberts is one of the most prominent right-wing voices in Washington. I don't know about that. He has close ties to Opus Dei, the Catholic group, of course, and has spoken openly about how he considers the outlawing of birth control to be one of the hardest political battles facing conservatives in the future. Oh, that's coming too. 20 years ago, Roberts, now a staunch supporter of Trump, was an academic who may have been uneasy among fellow professors who were not politically aligned with him. Yet, Hammond said, colleagues treated him with respect and kindness, including bringing food to his home after his wife had a baby, who was then kept up by the dog, and were happy to have him working at the university. One former colleague remembers being reprimanded by Roberts after she used her university email account to tell colleagues she was going to help campaign for John Kerry, the then Democratic nominee for president, because she recalled him saying, rightly, she now admits, that it was inappropriate, but relations were generally good. Marcia Weisiger, a colleague of Roberts at the time, who is now an environmental history professor at the University of Oregon, recalled being invited to dinner at Roberts' home with her husband, and Roberts telling both of them the story about how he had hit a neighbor's pit bull with a shovel and killed it. My husband and I were stunned. First of all, that he would do such a thing, and second of all, that he would tell us about it. If I did something horrific, I would not be telling my colleagues about it, she said. To make matters worse, she recalled Roberts saying that the neighbor in question had also had puppies and that he had considered killing them, too. Wow, a puppy killer. Weisiger's husband, who asked not to be named, recalled Roberts saying he had complained about the dog to the police, who were not responsive, and that the dog sometimes got into his yard, so he should go hit the police with a shovel, I guess. Roberts, records confirm, public records that is, was living with his wife and young family in a modest and mostly immigrant community in Las Cruces at the time, in a historic neighborhood, he was a history professor, lined with traditional adobe homes and chain-link fences. In his statement, Roberts claimed that the city later arrived and removed, quote, more than 10 dogs, unquote, from his neighbor's property, citing animal abuse. He said he was incredibly grateful to animal control for rescuing the abused animals, which he hit with a shovel, and was grateful that he and his daughter did not have physical contact with the dog, except for killing it. Roberts also identified the man who he called the animal owner. Let's see, put that in quotes, and he kind of is. I mean, unless we're not writing this from an animal rights perspective, are we? I don't know what this means. The animal owner, a native of Las Cruces named Daniel Aran, who a spokesperson for Roberts pointed out in an email, was sentenced to 78 months in prison. Got to throw that in there. Just your regular everyday neighbor who's now going to have the family dragged through the mud again. But okay, for cocaine trafficking in 2017, more than a decade after the alleged incident occurred, and now it's okay to kill his dog. There you go. Public records and The Guardian's reporting confirmed that Aran and his mother lived next door to Roberts at the time that Roberts lived there. The Guardian could not independently verify whether Roberts actually killed a dog or whether Roberts' account of his interactions with his neighbor's dog was accurate. The Guardian has repeatedly sought out public records to try to verify the alleged accounts. The city of Las Cruces, the police, and animal control authorities said public records were not available for the time frame in which the alleged incident occurred. But the Guardian did track down Daniel Aran, whose mother, Norma Noriega, still lives in the adobe home next to where Roberts previously lived in Las Cruces. So I guess it's coming together. Noriega's family moved into their home about 2002 with her husband and children, Denise Aran, who was about 7 at the time, and Daniel, who was about 16. Daniel Aran, who has been released from prison, but now will be going through some annoying pestering from the press again, and is now the owner of a small construction company, Daniel is. Oh, why is he harassing small business owners? I don't know. Well, he spoke to The Guardian from the front yard of their small stone house. Aran is lean and muscular, okay, with a chiseled face and a hardened stare. Yikes. Is that supposed to mean that he was in prison? Or I don't know what. When I was younger, I was wild, but I gave respect to get respect. Now I'm more about work and family, he said, dusting off his clothes from a day of construction. And I've always been a dog lover, an animal lover, since I was a little kid. I've always had dogs. Aran said he was diligent about watching his dogs, small pit bulls, which he bred, selling the pups as a way of making money for his family's household, which is kind of an American heartland thing to do, but not if you're Hispanic, I guess. Therefore, if you do that, then it's murder. I don't know. I mean, it's not what I don't think The Guardian is trying to say here, but I think it's what Roberts is trying to imply. Anyway, when asked if he had a dog disappear around 2004, he said, yes, definitely. My dog, Loca, a little female. She had been his favorite, he said. I had one female, and that was her. She was little, a little thing like this, he said, holding up his hands in an affectionate gesture. She was tiny, cute little thing. She went missing, and we could never find her. When he was asked by The Guardian about comments Roberts allegedly made to colleagues about killing a neighborhood pit bull with a shovel, he grimaced. Man, you never know what's inside someone's head, unless they let it out and tell their colleagues, I guess. I'm not here to make up stories or to say he did it, he said, but it was right around 2004 when all that happened that Loco was missing. He said, I wish I could say, yeah, I know this fool did that. I bet. But I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is my dog went missing and we never found her, and she wasn't at the dog catcher's. Aran also denied Roberts' claim that dogs had been taken away from the property. We had 3 dogs that we kept, and then there were puppies occasionally that I would sell, he said. His mother, 53-year-old Norma Noriega, sitting out in the front yard, also disputed Roberts' account. That never happened, she said in Spanish. Animal Services never came and took dogs. Sure, the dogs would get out on occasion, and we'd go find them and bring them back, but there was never an incident where our dogs were taken for abuse or whatever. That's simply not true. It was only with Loca that we could never figure out what happened. She disappeared, and we always knew it was strange that we simply never saw her again. Daniel went out looking for her, but she was never found, said Noriega. The family has had a number of pit bulls over the years. Brownie and Casper were their longtime pets, but it was the disappearance of Loca that had always distressed the family. She's the one that disappeared. We went out looking for her. We went out to the dog catchers, and we never found her, Aran said quietly. And I know the dog catchers never got her. Asked about his recollection of Roberts, Aran said, well, it's been more than 20 years, and he did acknowledge that his dogs could be noisy. I'm pretty sure he had to have some patience, said Aran, but as far as I can remember, he never came across as disrespectful, he said. So there you go. Well, it's an extensive retelling of the story, but they wanted to be sure that they had heard it correctly and do everything they could to try and verify the story of yet another Republican dog killer. I don't know why people like these guys or why they're considered an American political party. Oh, well, so now you're up to speed on that. The other, I think, widely discussed morning story was discussed online in the social media by Judd Legum, who then wrote it up for his still functioning. I think he's got another Substack going too, but still in action with popular information and exclusive, he says, reporting as he is that the Trump campaign is still being hacked. And people pointing out, it's interesting that they can't seem to stop the hacking, and B, this is potentially becoming rather dangerous. But this is a story mostly about how the press is treating the hacked material from the Trump campaign so completely differently from hacked material stolen from previous campaigns, which is a point that's been made before, but he's got an interesting angle on it. And let's start it, and then we'll take our break, and then I'll try some of this coffee during the 2-minute break. Email communications, Judd says, from individuals associated with the Trump campaign have been hacked by malign actors within the last 10 days. Popular information has confirmed. That's the new news hook here. They're still hacking these guys. And they're apparently either not interested in or incapable of providing any protection to their information. On September 18th, I, Judd Legum, was sent a message from Robert, which contained the cover page of a dossier on Senator J.D. Vance, the Republican vice presidential nominee, dated February 23rd, 2024. Robert refused to identify himself except to suggest that it was the same Robert who had provided stolen internal Trump campaign materials to Politico, the New York Times, and the Washington Post in July and August. I thought, you must have heard Robert's story, he said about himself, Robert using the name in the third person here. Robert eventually sent me a 271-page Vance dossier, along with similar dossiers on 2 other potential Donald Trump running mates, a 382-page document on North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, amazing that you could produce any pages on him, dated March 2nd, 2024, and a 550-page document on Senator Marco Rubio, dated April 1st, 2024. All of the dossiers were marked privileged and confidential. Roberts boasted that he had, quote, a lot of other Trump campaign materials. He sent me a dozen purported emails to and from top campaign staff, including senior advisor Susie Wiles, senior advisor Dan Scavino, I can't believe he's a senior advisor, and pollster John McLaughlin. The emails covered an 11-month period from October of 2023 through August of 2024. Robert also sent a 4-page letter dated September 15th, 2024, from an attorney representing Trump to 3 individuals at the New York Times. The letter has not been made public by either the Trump campaign or the paper. I provided a copy of the letter to Ben Smith, the editor-in-chief of Semaphore, who confirmed its authenticity with someone at the New York Times who had seen it. Smith has published a piece about the incident on Semaphore. He notes, parenthetically, the legitimacy of the letter proves that the person or people representing themselves as Robert has stolen electronic communications from people associated with the Trump campaign within the last 10 days. That's the new part. So who or what? Good question. Well put. Who or what is Robert? A threat analysis published by Microsoft on August 9th reported that in June of 2024, Mint Sandstorm, that's not somebody's fake wrestling name or anything like that. This is what they call a group, a hacker group, run by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC intelligence unit. And apparently in June of 2024, Mint Sandstorm sent a spear phishing email to a high-ranking official of a presidential campaign from a compromised email account of a former senior advisor. On August 10th, the next day, the Trump campaign said it was the victim of a hack by a foreign actor, citing the Microsoft report. 3 U.S. intelligence agencies have released joint statements on August 18th and September 19th It's about a month apart. August 18th, September 19th. Warning of Iranian malicious cyber actors who have obtained stolen non-public material from former President Trump's campaign. Iran has denied any role in the hack. Popular Information will not publish or excerpt the Trump campaign materials provided by Robert. The materials are stolen, and publishing the documents would be a violation of privacy and could encourage future criminal acts. That's also a good point. I, Judd says, believe that in some circumstances the publication of leaked materials can be justified. The Pentagon Papers, for example, were illegally obtained by Daniel Ellsberg, but the public interest in revealing the truth about the Vietnam War outweighed those concerns. The internal Trump campaign documents obtained by Popular Information may be embarrassing or problematic to members of the Trump campaign. Some of the documents have news value, but the stolen materials do not provide the public with any fundamental new insight about Trump or his campaign, so on balance, the relevant factors argue against publication. It's an interesting point to make, and by the way, just an interesting observation to make in general, that there is perhaps very little in the world that would be new or revelatory information about Donald Trump. I mean, if it was Donald Trump talking about how many women he had harassed or raped in the past, even then you would be hard-pressed to say, well, this is new information. It would be corroborative information that you might want to share, but I don't know. So it's difficult to say. But some even more interesting points about Judd's own personal experience with having personal emails hacked as a part of the Podesta trove that came out in 2016 and weaponized by the media against him, clearly the Clinton campaign, but him as an ancillary. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I was able to, gulp down that coffee, which was only kind of lukewarm during the 2 minutes, and find the other folks who were being thanked for their assistance, their initial drive to bring Project 2025 to the forefront. Not only John Oliver, but yes, I've identified not only the person I've found somebody else who I've identified, not only the person who spoke, but where they spoke. It was at the BET Awards, and it was the host of the BET Awards, Taraji Henson's comments on 2025, basically telling everybody, probably catching everybody unawares about that. And just, this was early on, and bringing it to everyone's attention along with John Oliver, who did the whole segment. But I would say catching everyone unawares, you tune into John Oliver for that kind of coverage, political news, and usually in-depth political coverage on something you may or may not have heard about before. But at an awards show, it's still kind of a little bit frowned upon to bring the politics up at the award shows. So it was a little risky to go ahead and do so, but I don't think anybody was expecting that. You could possibly anticipate these days, well, hey, welcome to the BET Awards. Donald Trump is really something of an a-hole. You got to watch out for that guy. Don't vote for him. Sure. But look out for Project 2025. It's an outline for an authoritarian second term. Like, wow, okay. I don't know if people were expecting that, but I happened to notice yesterday that Empty Wheel saying that pretty much. There's a lot of discussion, she said, of how nutty it is that everyone hates Project 2025. It didn't start with Harris. Taraji Henson and John Oliver played a key role before the VP focused on it. And that is certainly true. And somewhere in all this, well, here's a couple of links to the John Oliver piece about it. And that certainly, I think, helped popularize it as well. But just having a mention like that on an award show, really, I think, helped spread the word outside of the base of political junkies, I would guess. Okay. And somewhere in here was tip of the hat there, I think it was, to Don Moynihan for having focused on the personnel angle that got included in Project 2025, the old Schedule F. I know we paid some attention to that as well back in the day, but I wasn't doing investigative reporting on it. I was probably reading Don Moynihan about it too. But you were well aware of it too, and for that reason. So we thank Moynihan and anybody else who might have had a hand in bringing our attention to Schedule F. And now, back over to Judd Legum's Popular Info, where he recounts his personal experience with having his emails aired publicly under, well, that subtitle. My personal emails were weaponized by the media and the Trump campaign in 2016. Sort of a contrasting view to what's happening now, let's say. In 2016, Russian hackers were able to access years of emails from the personal account of John Podesta, who was serving as Hillary Clinton's campaign chair. I started working for Podesta in 2001 when I was a first-year law student at Georgetown. By the 2016 election, 15 years later, Podesta had been a colleague and a friend for 15 years, so the materials obtained by Russian hackers and published by WikiLeaks included correspondence between me and Podesta. Media organizations, including the Washington Post, the Denver Post, the National Review, and others, isolated a handful of my private emails to Podesta and used them as grist for articles that attacked my integrity and professionalism. I believe these insinuations were unfounded, but I was forced to defend my reputation in the media and with my colleagues at Think Progress, where I worked before starting this newsletter. I was a bit player in this drama, but it is still disturbing to have your private communications stolen by a foreign government and broadcast by major media outlets. So what Judd's telling us is he does have some empathy here, right? As Popular Information previously reported, outlets like Politico, the Washington Post, and the New York Times produced dozens of unflattering articles and blog posts about Podesta's emails. Everything was fair game, from Podesta's risotto recipe to his use of the word prick to describe a journalist he didn't like. And was it risotto? Because I thought it was polenta. I don't know. For some reason, it's in popular memory as polenta. But okay. But yes, there's more, by the way. There were a few tidbits of news buried in Podesta's emails, but no significant scandal. Most of the coverage amounted to little more than voyeurism. A Politico live blog of Podesta's stolen emails had more than 50 entries published over 3 weeks. Imagine that, right? Just contrast that to, well, we refused to publish these things, et cetera, et cetera. Live blogging it so that it wasn't even really run through an editor at any point, that's really something. Anyway, there you go. All the juiciest dirt in the Podesta emails explained was a Vanity Fair headline on November 3rd, 2016 that was representative of the coverage. Unlike the Trump campaign materials from Robert, Podesta's emails were posted online by WikiLeaks. But the media played a critical role in amplifying the material and turning a collection of mostly anodyne emails into an ongoing scandal that probably deserves dramatic music. The media did not verify, by the way, also did not verify the authenticity of the hacked materials. And this is an interesting trick. Watch this. The Clinton campaign declined to review 50,000 emails, who wouldn't, and contest or validate each one. The New York Times and others interpreted that as proof that they were all legitimate. Wow, that's an interesting leap to make, given the way they're being so careful now. The coverage lasted for weeks because the stolen emails were released by WikiLeaks in small batches. Each time a new batch of emails was released, the media swung into action, mining the stolen materials for any morsel that could be used in a story. There appeared to be little concern that both the content and cadence of the political coverage at a critical juncture of the election was being dictated by foreign actors. And, of course, the foreign actors were acting. Exactly. Right. The New York Times published at least 199 articles, about the stolen emails between the first leak in June of 2016 and Election Day. That's June, July, August, November. September. June, July, August, September, October, and a little bit of November. So 5 months, 199 articles. That seems like a lot. The New York Times editorial board wrote that any negative impact their coverage had on the Clinton campaign was Hillary Clinton's fault for not voluntarily releasing the information contained in the stolen emails. Imagine if months ago Mrs. Clinton had done her own giant information release, the New York Times editorial board wrote on October 22nd, 2016. Everyone would have long since moved on. Why would Hillary Clinton have said, everybody give me your risotto recipes if you've emailed them, and I will release them in order to avoid the scandal of being found out later on? What? The media frenzy over Podesta's emails was actively encouraged by Trump and his campaign. On July 26, 2016, Trump publicly implored Russia to acquire Clinton's internal emails, promising that the media would amplify them. And so they did. That's so odd. Russia, if you're listening, you know all about that one. I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press, Trump said. It was later revealed that Russia began targeting Clinton campaign officials on or around the same day. It's almost as if he's able to incite illegal activity, this Donald Trump. When WikiLeaks began posting the emails acquired by Russian hackers, Trump celebrated. He publicly mentioned WikiLeaks 141 times in the month before the election. WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks, Trump told a crowd in Pennsylvania on October 10th, 2016. It was tempting to use this opportunity to turn the tables on the Trump campaign and publish the stolen campaign materials provided to me by Robert, but I believe that is the wrong approach. Then a conspicuous silence. That's the name of the subhead of the next section. Not what's coming next, but there you go. That was a conspicuous silence. Thus far, the three major outlets have acknowledged that they also received stolen Trump campaign materials from Robert, Politico, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. Politico, like loving being included in the big three here. Well, they all have also declined to publish them. None of these outlets, however, have explained why their approach to stolen Trump campaign materials is so different from their approach to stolen Clinton campaign documents. Washington Post executive editor Matt Murray, for example, said he thought about who was likely to be leaking the Trump documents, what the motives of the hacker might have been, and whether this was truly newsworthy or not. But in 2016, the paper knew that Russia was likely behind the hack of the documents and was using them to interfere with the presidential election. Nevertheless, the Washington Post's coverage included excerpts that were not, by any fair definition, quote, truly newsworthy. The Washington Post, the New York Times, and Politico should be transparent about their decision-making and explain why it has changed dramatically over the last 8 years. That is a good point. I imagine you could come up with a reasonable explanation as to why, and most of the elements of it are in here, and say, we were young and naive in 2016. We didn't yet really know how much damage the Russians could do from over there in a basement in St. Petersburg to our political system. But we've now been through 4+ years of that damage, I guess 10 years of that damage, and we recognize and understand that that's a problem. We might not do the same. If Russia were to steal documents from the Harris campaign and attempt to release them, we might be just as cautious now. And it just so happens that we were young and foolish when we had information that was damaging to a Democratic campaign, and now we are experienced and wizened and not going to make the same mistake when it would damage a Republican campaign. Oh well, these things do happen. All right, an insightful piece and a good reminder of what's going on, and a heads up that the hack is still on. All wrapped up in a single article from Judd Legum. Let's see what else I put aside here. Oh yeah, I thought this was kind of interesting. Just before coming on the air, I intercepted the Blue Sky post of Mark Joseph Stern, who, just quickly we know this, I don't think he's written anything up about it yet, but let's see if I can. I don't think there's any article yet, but it's just sort of a heads up. Sort of scanning his latest posts to see, but no. At any rate, the information that was relevant to today's show, RFK Jr. I mean, that's hard to make relevant to today's show, but RFK Jr., who is currently fighting to remove his name, right, from the ballot in swing states. Swing states. Oh, take me off the ballot. I might siphon off votes from Donald Trump. We want Donald Trump to get every vote coming to him in a swing state. He's just asked the U.S. Supreme Court, for an emergency order to restore his name to the ballot in New York. How do you like that? It is also noted here, lead counsel is Jed Rubenfeld, which doesn't mean anything to me, but Ellie Margolis, the first commenter here, says, did not see that lead counsel coming. So I guess I should look into, who that is. Does that ring a bell for any of you in the audience right away? Armando, are you in the audience today? Does that make sense? I don't know. Let's see. Jed Rubenfeld. Shall I look at it? Wikipedia. I'll probably feel foolish for not knowing this, but let's see. An American legal scholar and professor of law at Yale Law School. Oh, okay, that's why everybody was talking about him. And I think they were talking about him without naming him. That is, they were saying, he's married to Amy Chua, who was the mentor of so many of the weirdo conservatives who came out of Yale Law School and found themselves with important clerkships and then moving into the judiciary, what's his name? Everybody. But Brett Kavanaugh, I think, among them as well. But she was just sort of infamous about this. And the Tiger Mom lady and the person who was essentially really kind of, in a weird way, grooming people for conservative legal clerkships and then moving into the upper echelons of the legal world. So Jed Rubenfeld is representing RFK in this. Okay. Now I see why everybody was saying, okay, I saw the mentions of Amy Chua and I was like, I know she's married to a guy who also is a law professor there and is very influential. I forget anything about him except that everyone was reminding me in those posts, social media posts, that he, like so many, has run into accusations of his own sexual misconduct in the past. And I guess maybe that's where he and RFK rub shoulders, Hey, let's talk about... On the other side, they talk about whether they killed dogs with shovels or not. On our side, we talk about our third-party weirdness out here, which is really just a subset of Trump weirdness. We talk about our... sexually abusing the people around us. Okay, well, at any rate, that's an interesting angle. So in swing states where RFK's name on the ballot could hurt Trump's efforts, he's suing to get off the ballot. In states where he can't actually, affect the outcome, I guess, like in New York, he's been removed, I guess, because he dropped out of the race in New York. I don't know what the rules are there, but I guess they said, all right, you dropped out. We're going to take you off the ballot. We still have time to do that. He's suing to get back on. That's interesting. There's a link to the actual filing here. Team Kennedy, American Values 2024, and Jeffrey Rose are the applicants for this emergency motion. Very interesting. And suing, I guess, the New York authorities in all of this. The only names among which that I actually recognize being Letitia James and Anthony Casale. I believe we've heard that name before, too. All right, application of Team Kennedy, American Values 2024, and Jeffrey Rose on appeal from the United States Circuit Court of Appeals of the Second Circuit, that'd be New York, for an emergency injunction pending appeal restoring Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to New York's 2024 ballot. There's a couple other names among the counsels for Team Kennedy here, but Rubenfeld is listed first. It looks like a rather lengthy brief. I'd be curious to see if anybody has read through it and can boil down the arguments and why they feel entitled to relief from the Supreme Court at this stage of the game. But anyway, just wanted to put that on the record as part of the ridiculousness that surrounds RFK Jr. that doesn't have anything to do, as far as I know, with Olivia Newsy. So, all right, let's see. Other couple of items that are waiting for discussion, and we'll just have to run them down in relative, I guess, reverse chronological order to their filing, and no other methodology, because I haven't had time to prepare that. But Empty Wheel, making mention yesterday of something that it's typically esoteric and weedy, but it makes me think this could change your perception of the story as it develops. So I think we ought to raise the warning here. She's looking at the law enforcement's discoveries as they look into the background and activity of the guy who was the latest one to try to assassinate Donald Trump, Ryan Routh, R-O-U-T-H. I don't know. I haven't really seen him widely discussed, so I don't know what pronunciation they're settling on. But most of us, by which I mean me, and so therefore probably you, I guess, have heard not that much about him. A couple of initial reports. First, just, we heard reports about the incident. It was on the golf course. They saw the gun muzzle sticking out from the shrubbery. Nothing really about him. Then a little bit of reporting that he's been a bit of a weirdo in the past, that he has records with the police, and he's kind of been a disturbing weirdo in a lot of different locations, but nothing that established, for instance, it's been a couple of days now, weeks, I guess, a week or two since it happened, and there was some doubt as to what was motivating it, and was it really an assassination attempt? In both, was he serious, and was he motivated by a particular hatred of Donald Trump, and was that a partisan political hatred or just some other disturbed individual hatred? Or was it, as Trump was trying to say, well, the liberals are trying to get me assassinated, and he's a liberal. Well, it seemed pretty clear that he didn't really fall into that category, but now we're finding out about the nature of his intent. And then, Greg was pointing out, well, is it really an assassination attempt any more so than the ones that they disarm attackers on their way to the White House, and they don't really, it clearly would be fair to say it's an assassination attempt, but did he get anywhere? Did he take any actions? Did he fire a shot? Was he any more serious than anybody else? This appears to indicate that perhaps he was. So, Empty Wheel writes under the headlines here, Ryan Routh's 11 phones and 2 Iran mentions. Okay, DOJ has submitted a detention memo for Ryan Routh. I'm going to go with that. R-O-U-T-H, but it's probably not that, but I'm not certain I could figure out what it is without searching around. Anyway, he's the man held on suspicion that he was trying to assassinate Donald Trump, which, people want to do that. What can I tell you? The memo cites a letter left in a box with a neighbor months ago. It's not clear whether that's a mailbox or just a box or I don't know what. Here, hold on to this for me, and it's a cardboard box with lots of stuff in it. I don't know. The memo cites a letter left in a box with a neighbor months ago. It seems to confirm that he was trying to assassinate Trump. Like months ago, he leaves this letter. And, by the way, offering 6 figures to anyone else who would accomplish the task. That same letter describes that Trump, quote, ended relations with Iran like a child, and now the Middle East has unraveled. Okay. The detention memo also cites the passage from Roth's manuscript that I noted here, apologizing to Iran for voting for Trump. So when she says noted here, she means her previous post, the concerning paragraph in the Ryan Roth complaint. But like I said, I'll stick with this. Here's the excerpt that was of such interest to those writing the detention memo. I am man enough to say that I misjudged and made a terrible mistake. In Iran, I apologize. It's not punctuated very well, but that's what it says. You are free to assassinate Trump as well as me for that error in judgment and the dismantling of the deal. He's not into commas, so it's a little difficult to read. But, yeah, well, I don't know what to tell you about that, except that, okay, well, now it seems clear that his intent was, in fact, assassination. This idea that he's got some in with Iranians, like that he needs to be apologizing to them, for one thing, or telling them, well, you're free to assassinate Donald Trump. I'm sure the mullahs are over there saying, Ryan, thank you. I've been waiting for your permission on this one, but you know, he's obviously a little touched, but it's an interesting excerpt. The memo, Marcy goes on to say, describes a number of other things that suggest an operational security far exceeding that of a mentally ill man seeking glory. That's the interesting angle here. As I noted in the earlier post, the phone he had on his person while surveilling the golf course was one for which he had posted the WhatsApp number, while Asif Merchant, I don't know, charged in an attempt to recruit hitmen to target Trump. I never heard of the guy, but apparently that happened. While he was still at large on July 10th. So what are we talking about here? There's another guy who is arrested and charged in an attempt to recruit hitmen to target Trump. It's probably not hard to do, quite honestly. But let's see. So the phone that Roth had was one for which he had posted the WhatsApp number. So he posted it somewhere, his WhatsApp number somewhere, while there was another guy who was at the time running around looking for hitmen to kill Trump, and this guy said, here's my number. Okay, but in addition to that phone, Roth, I don't know, had 6 cell phones in his truck. That's not typical. At least 2 of which used different carriers. Okay. And 4 more cell phones in the box that he left at the neighbors. So here, hold on to this box. 4 cell phones, a letter, and God knows what else in there. As I mentioned, Merchant provided the information in that case. What? Oh, Merchant provided the informant in that case, the one that got him arrested, instructions on acquiring secure phones. So it's starting to look like maybe he might have had some communications with this Asif Merchant, who was allegedly out looking for hitmen. So it had instructions on how to get extra and secure phones. I don't know. Maybe none of these extra phones were in fact secure, but who knows what he might have taken from this. Okay, as previous reports described, the license plates on his truck were stolen, and he had 2 other sets of plates in the truck. One of the phones in the truck had been used to search for directions to Mexico. By the way, south is the direction you're thinking of. Again, I guess from Florida, west. Anyway, again, it certainly may be that Roth was simply disturbed, but more of this looks like Iran may have been involved. And remember, on the day of the Butler shooting, or nearby, near miss, and then ricochet from shrapnel that cut Trump's ear, we had been told that the Secret Service and local police had been alerted very recently to the possibility that Iran was, in fact, looking to find ways to assassinate Donald Trump. And so this carries over from that. It might be that there really was Iranian involvement in all of this. Lots of phones, certainly. And I guess, now that I think about it, that he was down at Trump's golf property in South Florida. The directions to Mexico, if they're driving, because they mentioned having license plates, would in fact probably involve directions to go north in order to get out of the Florida peninsula and then head west toward Mexico. Unless, of course, he was driving a Cybertruck, which can be briefly used as a boat, and then the directions would be west, if not southwest. So, okay, from here, the direction is generally south, though, but it would still be southwesterly. I get the idea, though, looking for directions to Mexico. All right, not something typically done, and lots of phones. Very interesting. Our next break coming up, we can take a peek, though, at what might be in our next segment. In fact, I can tell you what will be in the next segment, because chronologically in reverse order, the latest on what's going on with the spending bills in Congress. It is Tuesday. And ordinarily we would be discussing this with Joan McCarter, but still a bit of tumult going on in terms of what's happening in in Seattle, or in Portland, rather. And all right, well, once the dust has settled and Joan has more organized time on her hands, perhaps we'll hear from her at some later date. Anyway, ordinarily we could discuss this with her in our fourth, how many segments do we do? Fourth segment, but we can pick it up right after the break when we check in on what's happening. Greg, of course, checked in with us yesterday, just had questions about procedurally how it would be working, and I guess we stumbled upon the right answer. There was, I guess, in between then and now, there was some speculation that perhaps Johnson would be taking things. Well, he wanted to take it to the Rules Committee to have the CR, however it came out, brought to the floor under a rule so that it could pass with just a bare majority. But it was unclear how he would get the Rules Committee to handle this, given that there were so many members who would stand in opposition to the way he wanted to handle it. Was he going to get Democratic votes on the committee to get the rule that he wanted? Answer, nope. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm a little bit late in getting back to the microphone. And let's see, I have this news update in terms of maintaining your voice during a show like this. All right, I took a little break for some water, and then I thought, oh, you know what might be good? Feeling a little bit congested. Not quite a cold coming on, but not sure how to fix it, and the salt water gargle thing was only partially helping, and I thought, well, it's not a breakfast food, but wouldn't wasabi peas be an excellent curative for all of this? And I'm not certain that that's the case, quite honestly. Although it has loosened things up quite a bit. I don't know if it's going to be making an appreciable difference. But if it does, then note for the record, please. Wasabi peas, excellent idea. We've tried saltwater gargle. We've tried hot teas. And wasabi peas hasn't really been on the menu for a while, but actually quite effective, now that I think about it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe something that you want to do 10 minutes before air rather than in a 1 minute break. Okay, so enough of that. Time now to check in with what's going on in the Congress of the United States with respect to operating the United States government going forward any more than 6 days from now. How about that? That's more important than the wasabi peas. House GOP swerves around conservative opposition for stopgap spending bill. That's the headline from The Hill that gives us a hint as to what actually happened in the Rules Committee yesterday. But Greg was very interested in what might be the outcome. And I think we kind of stumbled into the answer just on the fly, which, like I say, I say it like we stumbled into the answer as if there was no particular expertise involved in figuring it out. And I sell myself short and all of that, but that's something I do very frequently with all things. I know how this stuff works for the most part, and most people find it weedy, esoteric, boring, or inscrutable more than anything else. And as a result, pardon me, there's some of those wasabi peas making themselves felt. Okay. Pardon me. Note for the editor on that one. Anyway, I regained my composure here, but what often happens, if you understand how these things work and it's a matter of course for you, I mean, that's you overlook that. That's a skill. That's something that most others don't have. Again, it too may be boring to most people, but if you have an interest, then it's surely fascinating, I guess, briefly anyway, to talk to somebody who would be able to run that through and without any preparation or backgrounder on what's happening, give you a pretty good guess as to how things would go. We said that there has got to be a plan B, but probably also a plan C, a plan B for plan B, which most people would just go to just calling plan C. But that Johnson would bring the combination CR and SAVE Act to the floor, not be able to get it done. Plan B would probably be to bring a clean CR to the floor. The only question would be, would it be a clean CR for the same duration, 6 months, and just chop the SAVE Act out? Or would you, in addition, cut the duration of the clean CR, whether by half or a month or whatever? I'm not certain. There's a number of places you could land on. Then bringing it to the Rules Committee, would you be able to convince some of the hardliners on the Rules Committee who are there through no fault of your own, unless perhaps I guess it's possible that Mike Johnson lent his name to the conservative efforts to force Kevin McCarthy to put those hardliners on the Rules Committee, so maybe then it wouldn't be through no fault of his own. I don't really know the background there. But I mentioned Chip Roy. He's kind of the leader of that faction. Thomas Massie, also a big part of it. And would they stand in the way of Johnson getting a rule for the CR as he envisioned it coming to the floor without the SAVE Act? That was problematic. He might have been able to talk them into it, but probably not. But one part that we skipped over was it might be possible to replace the lost Republican hardliner votes with Democratic votes. There aren't a great number of Democratic votes on the Rules Committee just by the nature of the committee. Even if the Speaker doesn't control it, the party, nobody controls that one anymore, but there'll be far more, it's an unbalanced committee. It's not meant to be evenly split. It'll be very heavily Republican. So it's possible, though, that if you lose only a couple of Republican votes, you might be able to replace them with Democratic votes and pass a rule that way. Ordinarily, you would never count on members of the minority voting for a rule being pushed by the Speaker and the majority, but it was possible that Democrats might regard a clean CR as what they wanted and so therefore go along with passing a rule. But I don't think they ever put it to the test. I think, though, instead, Plan C would have been to say, all right, fine, we'll do it by suspension of the rules, and that way we can more or less, we can kind of bypass the Rules Committee. The upside of it being that the Rules Committee can't amend the bill in any way if we just go with suspension of the rules. The downside being that you need 2/3 vote of the House to do it, but it might just be the case that with all the Democrats on board, why not have a clean CR? And some portion of the Republicans, about 88 to 90 Republicans, if all the Democrats are present and cast their votes in favor, would do the trick. And couldn't you get 88 out of 200 and something Republicans to do that? You probably could find that kind of support. Maybe they would go that way. It's a little risky, but it saves them from having to deal with the Rules Committee. That, as it turns out, is more or less what happened. So, like I said, we stumbled into the correct answer, mostly by just knowing how things work and who are the personalities on there. And on the fly, you're able to figure out, suspension of the rules. Even though yesterday's coverage, as it turns out, the coverage between yesterday morning when Greg asked the question and yesterday afternoon when this happened, the answer being provided was, well, maybe they'll figure out a way to get those votes. That must be the case because why else would you go to the Rules Committee, et cetera, et cetera. And no, it turns out that suspension of the rules, which Greg said, but isn't that harder to pass that way? Yeah, it's harder to get those. Well, it's a higher number that you have to get, but I don't know how hard it is to get those numbers. Turns out to be the direction they're going. So, House GOP swerves around conservative opposition for stopgap spending bills, say Emily Brooks and Michael Schnell for The Hill. House Republican leaders are changing course on the process for considering a 3-month government funding bill, abandoning plans to bring it up through a regular procedural process after opposition from some in the right flank threatened to block it. Now the stopgap, which would keep the government funded through December 20th, a few days shy of just before Christmas, but still basically just before Christmas. That'd be about the point when people are getting ready to fly out of there. That's expected to hit the floor this week under suspension of the rules, a process that bypasses the need to pass a procedural rule, requires significant support from Democrats to reach the 2/3 support threshold needed for passage, and is abhorred by hardline conservatives. It's what got Kevin McCarthy kicked out of office. It's just the latest hurdle for Speaker Mike Johnson and House Republicans on the government funding legislation after an initial House GOP gambit on funding failed due to opposition from within their own party last week. The House Rules Committee convened on Monday afternoon to consider a group of measures, including the stopgap, but later in the evening, the panel decided to drop the government funding measure from the final bundle of bills packaged together that evening. So, we'll bring it up under suspension, which is the way I thought we would to begin with, said Representative Jim McGovern, the ranking Democrat on the committee. And he said, they were just attributing this to when he said it, on Monday. Okay. And, you'll get your wish, House Rules Committee Chair Michael Burgess of Texas responded. The stopgap is poised to sail through the House now, is that right? Now that it is being considered under suspension of the rules, with a large number of Democrats and a significant cohort of Republicans expected to back the measure. It will then head to the Senate ahead of the September 30th shutdown deadline. This week's vote will cap off the current showdown, that's cute, in the House, which has caused headaches for the Speaker. Johnson's first play call in the government funding fight was to pair a 6-month continuing resolution with a measure to require proof of citizenship to register to vote, dubbed the SAVE Act, Safeguard American Voter Eligibility. Snore of a title. Anyway, that was pushed by former President Trump. That package, to be sure, was never expected to become law because of opposition of the Senate Democrats and the White House, but it was intended to be an opening salvo in negotiations. Went nowhere. Johnson, however, never got the chance to make that opening offer because it could not pass through the House. 14 Republicans, consisting mostly of fiscal hawks who balk at any kind of continuing resolution ever, voted against the bill. Johnson is now working to move a 3-month stopgap that excludes the GOP-backed bill, SAVE, and was crafted by leaders in both parties and chambers. The Speaker initially sought to move the legislation through regular order, which requires the passage of a procedural rule. We try to follow regular order as much as possible, Johnson had told reporters earlier in the day on his move to advance the 3-month CR through a rule. Hours later, however, some hardline conservatives said that they would oppose a procedural rule when it hit the floor as a way to protest the legislation. If the rule failed, a reality that would only require a handful of GOP no votes, the rule, or rather the House, would be unable to debate the bill and vote on final passage. Some on the right flank were already vowing to vote against such a rule. I'm a no. Representative Ralph Norman of South Carolina told The Hill when asked how he would vote on the rule, pointing to the exclusion of the SAVE Act. So some faction is against removing SAVE, some faction is against CRs in general, some faction is against what CRs might do to the Pentagon. There's all kinds of factions in the Republican Party there. Democrats were highly unlikely to take the unusual step of supporting the procedural vote, even if they supported the stopgap. Rules votes are generally party line affairs, regardless of how lawmakers intend to vote on underlying legislation, but conservatives in the House have used them to protest legislation they disagree with. It's not clear that House Republicans have the ability to undertake the basic responsibilities of governing, which should tell the American people all they need to know, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries reportedly told Punchbowl News earlier on Monday. Emerging from a leadership meeting in Johnson's office earlier Monday evening, Representative Kevin Hern, Republican of Oklahoma, said he believes that there would be enough Republican support to pass the December 20th continuing resolution under suspension of the rules. People realize, we've got to win an election. Well, you won't win an election, but okay. And there's a lot going on right now, and the world's on fire, Hern said, mentioning the need to fund the military or the fire department. Politically, the situation is far from ideal for Johnson. Hardline conservatives have criticized both Johnson and his predecessor, former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, for bringing bills to the floor that got more support from Democrats than Republicans. That's true. McCarthy was also ousted from the speakership a year ago, just after a remarkably similar situation, after he was forced to fast-track a short-term stopgap due to Republicans tanking a partisan option. Johnson, though, rejected the comparison to McCarthy. He would, but really the only difference is, and I think it's an important one, is they just really seem to hate Kevin McCarthy, and so they use it as an excuse to get rid of him. He may do the very same thing, Johnson, that McCarthy did, and they just don't have the same hatred for him as they did for McCarthy for various reasons. No one really, knows why, but McCarthy was just kind of a dope and a jackass. And Johnson's just a jackass. He's a little bit less of a dope. And maybe they're just like, or maybe they can only put up with it for so long. And McCarthy had been Republican leader for a while, and they just said, screw it. Guys outstayed his welcome. It may be that Johnson eventually outstays his welcome. It just hasn't arrived yet. Anyway, very different circumstances, he says to reporters on Monday. Pressed by a reporter who said it was the same play call, Johnson said, no, it's not. End of article, everybody. It is the same play call, but it's not necessarily going to be the same outcome. I think it's just maybe about personalities and timing. At this point, Johnson just hasn't been around long enough to grate on nerves as long as McCarthy was. But that's the only difference in the circumstances. Although I'd be curious to know if he would ever sit down and explain what the difference is as he sees it. But, I think most of it would be nonsense. So, anyway, let's see. It's time for an update on Mark Robinson and his porn sites. And I have it on good authority from listeners of the show that everybody finds it funny when I say nude Africa over and over again, possibly for no reason. Or at least, it's the word I got from Chet Sandberg, who said that he was listening to the show and just said, I love your just saying nude Africa randomly over and over again. So I don't know how long that joke lasts, but nude Africa. That's pretty funny. Well, as it turns out, he was involved in some other porn sites that have, let's say, also dumb names, but they don't seem as dumb, I guess, as nude Africa. That's just like non-English speaker weird, which, has its own problems. Newly unearthed data, we learn about in Politico, newly unearthed data shows closer links to Robinson and porn and dating sites as well. Illustrated with a picture of Mark Robinson at the Faith and Freedom event, whatever the hell that is, mopping his brow with a red towel here. I mean, it's meant to imply that he's mopping his brow now because he can't believe how much trouble he's in. But he was in fact mopping his brow because of how Jesus-ed out he was at the time at Faith and Freedom. But okay, Trump, who endorsed Robinson, has publicly remained silent, it is said here in the subheader, but I don't think that's true anymore, about the embattled lieutenant governor. I believe he has now withdrawn his endorsement, which he never made in the first place, something, even though the RNC, which is run by a Trump, refuses to withdraw its endorsement of Robinson. So it's a little bit of a confusion, and it's a distancing of convenience more than anything else. There's no getting around what Trump said about him before. But, this is the game they're playing. So what's the new deal, if any? It's just more of the same, essentially. Natalie Allison reporting this for Politico. Let's see how quickly you can run through this. Top Republican leaders in North Carolina have called on Mark Robinson to provide proof, not to resign, but to provide proof that he wasn't behind salacious posts on a pornography website. But new information continues to point to his involvement in the type of online sexual activity he denies. User data reviewed by Politico shows that the person using the Nude Africa account that reportedly belonged to Robinson had accessed the porn website from a location not far from Robinson's home. I mean, do we really need to? Okay, come on. Fine. Robinson's email address is also registered with other previously unreported dating websites, Politico found. I mean, depending on the kind of dating website, that could be more or less problematic. Like, I don't know. If you told me Nude Africa was a dating site, I would be like, well, it seems like a pretty particular kind of dating, right? So, dating website like Meet Your Match or eHarmony, that's one thing. Another one called, F-Town would be like, I don't know, that's not really a dating site so much. Let's go on and find out what's going on here. Robinson, whose top campaign advisors and nearly all his staff resigned on Sunday, continues to deny a CNN report that he called himself a black Nazi, admitted to enjoying watching transgender pornography, problematic for Republicans in particular, and made graphic comments about other sexual preferences more than a decade ago on, you guessed it, Nude Africa. He also denied a report by Politico that he had an account on Ashley Madison, a website for married people seeking affairs. So that too, something different from your traditional dating site, per se. A new Politico account, not nude, but a new Politico review. Nude Politico. That's my, that's my new porn website. Everybody join me at Nude Politico. A new Politico review of account data associated with Robinson's email address from multiple websites that had been previously hacked, and the website's breached user data posted on the dark web in recent years, shows that the IP address listed with Robinson's Nude Africa account is located in the Piedmont Triad region of North Carolina, where he lived. Come on. It was his. Enough. Files from the if you were really doing the forensic analysis and you were trying to prove it in court, you would say, oh, we're still not there. Exactly. I mean, the Piedmont Triad region, that's actually pretty dopey, in terms of offering proof. Really? So he was one of 100,000 people. How many in that region? Piedmont Triad region. All right. Files from the various data breaches that captured Robinson's user information were shared with Politico by Megan Squire, a computer scientist and deputy director for data analytics at the Southern Poverty Law Center, a nonprofit legal advocacy group that has not taken a position on North Carolina governor's race, but has monitored Robinson's extremism and hateful statements as lieutenant governor and in his prior life as an influencer, Squire said. An influencer. I go to porn sites. I'm an influencer now. Okay, I get you. He was an influencer for different reasons. Robinson's account on the pornographic online forum, which was part of a 2018 data breach by Nude Africa's parent website, Wife Lovers, which, I mean, in one sense, that's what you're supposed to be, in a faithful relationship. But what you mean is other people's wives. Okay. That's, outside of the bounds of the norms of relationships. So, okay. If nude Africa wasn't funny to you, maybe wife lovers will strike you funny. Well, it turns out, let's see, where the account was registered with an IP address corresponding to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is a large city. A city near Robinson's home of Greensboro and part of the same Tri-City region. This is very vague, but it's funny. The same IP address was also listed in breached user data from an account registered to Robinson's email on the dating website Fling. I don't know anything about that one. That one implies that it's sort of Ashley Madison-ish, I guess. Politico found leaked database files from the other website, Fling. Breaches, from other website breaches, sorry. Not Ashley Madison, not Fling, but some third ones. Not Nude Africa, partially clothed Antarctica, I don't know. Well, from other website breaches show that Robinson's email address was registered on dating websites Adult Friend Finder, which also doesn't sound like cute and fun like eHarmony, and Mate One, which I don't know what that means. I mean, could be anything. It's not Mate One, West Virginia. It's a dating site for fans of the of mining. Unionization history. That's a very niche thing. And now also, the now defunct website. And how could you go out of business with a name like Lords of Porno? I don't know whether that gets dramatic or horror dramatic music. Lords of Porno. I don't know. Well, I mean, I don't know. That's like lords, that's a big deal. They could have just gone with loads of porno. Like, that's what we have here. Plenty of it, or worse. Anyway, okay. That's not nearly as funny as Nude Africa, in my view. There is no evidence that Robinson was recently active on any of these websites. The leaked data from Adult Friend Finder listed his last visit, so there, as December 31st, 2013. New Year's Eve. Looking for an adult friend, just pointing that out. I mean, most people are busy. The things that people can do with the internet now is incredible, Robinson told CNN last week, denying the posts were his after being presented with evidence linking the account to him. He means, of course, you could fake evidence that I was very interested in a very large number of weirdly named porn sites. I mean, I was, but you could also fake it. The breached data also revealed that the password that Robinson's email address used to register with Nude Africa was nearly identical to a password, bad operational security, nearly identical to a password used by 3 separate accounts registered under his wife's email address on non-pornographic websites, including DatPiff. I don't know. DAT. Capital, and all one word here. That PIFF, which must mean something. Probably, I guess it says non-pornographic. Now, a now retired hip-hop mixtape website. I gotcha. The passwords use the same obscure phrase. I love Nude Africa. Well, anyway, Mike Lonergan. No, it doesn't say that in there. I'm just supposing that was it, but interesting. I'm curious about what the same obscure phrase might be, but I mean, if they put it out there, people will just start going to every website and trying to use it, trying to see if they can hack Mark Robinson. But what's the point in protecting him from a hack now? Mike Lonergan, Robinson's spokesperson, the last one left, I guess, repeated the campaign's denials that the lieutenant governor, quote, ever created or used an account on any of these websites, unquote, and stated that they're hiring lawyers to investigate the matter. I'm just a lawyer who loves looking into Nude Africa. So, what can you do? Robinson, who had previously admitted to other past issues that came to light through news stories, such as mismanaging his finances and taking his wife to get an abortion decades ago, has stayed firm in denying the latest revelations. It's only been a couple of days. That prompted top North Carolina Republicans, including Senators Tom Tillis and Ted Budd, to call for Robinson to show evidence of libel beyond just claiming the stories are smears. If the reporting on Mark Robinson is a total media fabrication, he needs to take immediate legal action, Tillis wrote on Friday. And North Carolina Republican Party Chair Jason Simmons told Politico in a statement that the accusations Robinson is facing are deeply troubling. He asked for Susan Collins' help on that one, adding that he needs to explain them to the people of North Carolina, although please just don't. Robinson has not filed any lawsuits related to the allegations about his online activity. During a campaign stop on Monday, Robinson said he's considering everything up to legal counsel to take CNN to task for what they have done to us, WRAL reported. The Raleigh-based TV station also reported that Robinson has rejected offers from supporters to connect them with information technology experts who would help him investigate the posts. So he doesn't really seem interested in doing that, and probably with good reason. Former President Donald Trump, who endorsed Robinson, watch out, did he say the word endorsed? Endorsed Robinson in the Republican primary earlier this year, has publicly remained silent, up to now anyway. I think he did make some statement recently. I saw that insinuated on social media. Maybe that's not true, but has remained silent, at least up to the writing of this article, about the embattled lieutenant governor. Trump did not mention him Saturday at the rally in Wilmington, North Carolina, and Robinson did not appear at the event. You know all about that. I think we're done with this article. We'll be right back.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Like I said, I think we're done with Mark Robinson for the day. The rest of the information, somewhat interesting background. Let's see, Tennessee's Governor Bill Lee, who chairs the Republican Governors Association, is pulling his support from Robinson. So there's that. Let's see, J.D. Vance echoed calls by North Carolina Republican leaders for Robinson to explain how the allegations are false, though he did not call on Robinson to step down. So profiles encouraged there. Let's see, after canceling campaign events last week, Robinson appeared at the Fayetteville Motor Speedway on Saturday, saying he was focused on the race and calling recent reports about him garbage. So the question is, was he saying, well, I'm not answering that, I'm going to focus on the race for the governorship, or are we talking about the race that's happening today at Fayetteville Motor Speedway? I'm curious. It's unclear whether there even was one going on today or whether that was his own campaign event. Okay, well, I think the important stuff about him has been sorted out at this point. And I don't know. We'll see whether he wants to make any denials. All right, let's see. Other things to catch up on. Oh, there was something else from the weekend news that we didn't get to, which is that it seems Jack Smith, still at work, and filing had asked for permission to file an extra long, motion? I'm not even certain what we're looking at here, but we're filing something with Tanya Chutkin's court with respect to the documents case. And I'll bring you Empty Wheel's report on it. And that might get a little bit weedy, but perhaps we can find some simpler explanations of what's going on. But at least we'll give you a rundown on what stage we're at with the litigation here. Trump will stage an emergency, she's afraid is the case, to ban Jack Smith's book report. What's going on here? The idea is this. Marcy writes, I expect on top of everything else this week, Trump's lawyers are going to claim an emergency of some kind. Not that he would necessarily spark some international event to use that as the emergency, but something, smaller bore could still be an emergency with respect to this procedural maneuvering. But Trump's lawyers are going to claim an emergency to try to ban Jack Smith's book report. What does she mean by that? Currently due Thursday. And that would be in 2 days from now. As you'll recall, maybe you won't recall because we haven't talked about it much, after Judge Tanya Chutkan finally got the Trump January 6th case back, right after the Supreme Court dealt with it on a certain level, she agreed with Jack Smith's proposed path forward. What did they want? Just to remind you, it is the presidential immunity claims that the Supreme Court very poorly and inadvisedly dealt with, handing back this nebulous, weird, and frankly should be considered unconstitutional interpretation of presidential immunity. It was remanded to the courts that were already considering the case. The trial court, Judge Chutkan, has to consider whether or not the actions being alleged by the special prosecutor, by Jack Smith, are the type that should be considered, of the sort that should be considered, that a president or former president should be considered immune from prosecution. And it will require a very detailed examination, which, it creates its own complications. So we'll put it this way, as Marcy says. As you'll recall, after Judge Tanya Chutkan got the case back, she agreed with Jack Smith's proposed path forward. They would submit a brief explaining how the superseding indictment that we heard about the other day complies with the Supreme Court's immunity opinion. And Chutkan set a deadline for September 26th, that's Thursday, for that brief. Trump seems certain that if voters see the brief, he will lose the election. And again, Smith has asked permission to file a much longer than usual brief. There's I guess it's a rule, a local rule, about how long briefs on preliminary motions like this are supposed to be. But Smith asked for permission to suspend that page limit in order to go through the specifics that he believes the Supreme Court mandated as part of the factual inquiry that the court's going to have to make here. The court's going to have to make a detailed factual inquiry. I need more than 45 pages that are usually allowed for a brief like this. And he's thinking, 100 plus pages, perhaps 100, and I think I might have seen 180 or something like that bandied about. I don't know if that matters too much what the actual number is, but that it would be very factual and detailed, and that he would also he'd file it under seal and also provide a redacted version that could be released publicly. But this is one of the pieces of fallout from the ruling, interestingly enough, is that Jack Smith will say, all right, well, the Supreme Court says it has to be a very detailed set of information that demonstrates the kind of behavior that would fall outside of the presumption of immunity. I will detail that, which, is an opportunity to air that very dirty laundry pre-trial, if they're allowed to do so. And so, of course, even in redacted form, the Trump campaign feels certain that it would hurt them if Jack Smith got to lay these allegations out in front of everybody. So they're going to do what they can to prevent it. Last Thursday, Trump's lawyers submitted what was supposed to be a discovery filing in which they basically just said, no briefing before the election. Their excerpt that Marcy reprints here says, dismissal is required to protect the integrity of the presidency and the upcoming election, as well as the constitutional rights of President Trump, and the American people, in case you don't care very much about Donald Trump. How so? No real reason. They just said that it was the case. We got to protect the constitutional rights of everybody by dismissing the case and making sure that there is someone who's above the law. That way we can preserve everyone's constitutional rights. Judge Chutkan does not have to rule on those issues before determining the immunity question, though. The dismissal question can be handled after that, right? So the filing was better read as, "Help me, Sammy Alito. Help me, John Roberts. You're my only hope." Yesterday, Jack Smith, this was written on the 22nd, so 2 days ago. So Friday. Yesterday, Jack Smith, it must have been Friday, submitted a request to file excess pages. There we are, 180 pages instead of 45. In it, he disclosed that Trump objected and wanted a chance to respond with a deadline set for Tuesday, September 24th. And then a quote here, defense counsel opposes the government's motion at this time and requests that the court set a deadline of September 24th at 5 p.m. for the defense's response. Judge Chutkan ordered Trump's team to file their opposition 1 day earlier, Monday, yesterday, September 23rd. Note that Trump's team filed their last filing after 5 p.m., after which Judge Chutkan made it clear that she'll permit no more of that. Defendant shall file any opposition to the government's motion for leave to file oversized motion by September 23rd at 5 p.m. We should look up to see whether they did that, but let's assume that they made that deadline. Trump will oppose not just the excess pages, 180 instead of 45, but the entire filing. Now he's got one less day to make that argument, so it is possible that he missed the deadline. We'll find out. Which is what you need to understand. The other things, which is what you need, that is, to understand the other things in the Jack Smith request. Trump is going to stage an emergency to get this question elevated to SCOTUS to prevent the filing this week. Is that right? He will try to take things to SCOTUS, or rather, he will try to take things that SCOTUS ordered Chutkan to do out of her hands and put them back before SCOTUS. And that would be rather amazing if he's able to make that work. But there's reason to believe that he could. But again, the background of the situation is, again, the Supreme Court ruled gave him a break in the presidential immunity case, but came out saying, well, okay, there has to be a detailed factual inquiry made by the trial court to determine whether or not the things he's being charged with fall under the category of presumptive immunity and or absolute immunity, which is a thing that the Supreme Court very often says. They want to get this outcome, but they want to push off responsibility. So they'll say, all right, the trial court has to make this decision. And then if the trial court then says, okay, we'll make this decision, they say, no, not like that. We meant something else. And they'll be able to say, they always will reserve the right. Okay, the trial court must make this determination. All right, we've made this determination. Well, you made the determination wrong. We're going to review that. They could always do that. But usually you have to wait until the determination is made. Trump wants to avoid the determination from being made and move it back to this. He's going to have to convince the Supreme Court this week, right away, in fact, that you need to say you didn't mean it when you said that the trial court was supposed to make this determination. You need to turn around and say, no, we meant we'll make the determination, which would be talk about, it was such an absurd conclusion the first time. How absurd would it be now to say there are certain categories of presumptive immunity? We don't know what they are, but we know them when we see them, like with pornography, and we'll be the ones to determine that. Yes, we said that the trial court should determine it in the first instance, but what we really meant is, we'll make that decision. We'll tell you whether certain presidents are immune or not. Come back to us. Let's see whether he's willing to try it. It's very galling that he might, but he certainly will try anything. He's got the chutzpah for it. Can he make it work? Well, there is an article I've been sitting on that might unnerve you about that, and perhaps this would make a great segue after this. So, right, what you need to understand are the other things here. In the Jack Smith request, Trump's going to stage some kind of emergency. He's going to claim that there's reason for the Supreme Court to step in and take away the job that they assigned to Chutkan and do it themselves. Anticipating that, Smith starts his request by laying out that he's just trying to do what Chutkan ordered to show that the SCOTUS ordered precisely this briefing. That's why he's filing it. In Trump versus United States, he goes ahead and says, the Supreme Court emphasized the, quote, necessarily fact-bound, unquote, nature of any presidential immunity analysis. Quoting them, he says, determining whose characterization may be correct and with respect to which conduct requires a close analysis of the indictment's extensive and interrelated allegations. Okay. And it also says, the analysis, therefore, must be fact-specific and may prove to be challenging. And I guess that, too, is an opening to them saying it's so challenging that no human being can actually accomplish it, and you have not, even if Judge Chutkan thinks you has. It also says, knowing, for instance, what else was said contemporaneous to the excerpted communications, or who was involved in transmitting the electronic communications and in organizing the rally, the one at the Ellipse, could be relevant to the classification of each communication. Could be. The Supreme Court remanded to this court, Chutkan's court, quote, to determine in the first instance, with the benefit of briefing we lack, the Supreme Court lacks, whether the defendant's conduct in this area qualifies as official or unofficial. In other words, it's very clear. The Supreme Court said Chutkan's court has to determine whether or not the actions taken by Trump will be classified as official acts or unofficial acts. Unofficial acts being ones that he could be found criminally liable for. Official acts being ones for which he is immune. So go find that out. Now that Jack Smith proposes that the court make that determination, Trump is going to race to the Supreme Court and say, I want you to go back and say that, no, we didn't mean that the trial court should do that, even though you clearly said it like 5 times. I want you to say, only the Supreme Court is qualified. We're taking this case back away from Chutkan. A few paragraphs later, Smith describes that because this review will be what SCOTUS reviews on appeal, which they anticipate, of course, with Trump, everything will be appealed, the record must be comprehensive, thus the need for 180 pages. How does he say it? The court has been directed to conduct a detailed, fact-bound, and thorough analysis of the government's case to make appropriate immunity determinations. Because the court will make determinations in the first instance, that is, you'll be the first ones making this determination, that will be subject to exacting appellate review. It is essential that the court ensure that the record in support of its determination is complete. The government believes that a comprehensive brief by the government will be of great assistance to the court in creating that robust record, and the government thus seeks leave to exceed the typical limit for a single motion, which is ordinarily 45 pages, limiting replies to 25 pages. Smith goes into detail about the breakdown of those 180 pages. Half will be narrative. You can tell a story here. 30 pages of it are footnotes, and a bunch are exhibits. Those details will only matter if we ever get to see it, of course. Remember, Trump is looking for some basis to cause an emergency that will allow him to get back to SCOTUS. So Jack Smith will, and probably would have in any case, submit the filing under seal and only afterwards work on unsealing it for the voting public. As it says here in this another grab quote here, for the court's awareness, the opening brief and its exhibits contain a substantial amount of sensitive material, as defined by the protective order. Consistent with the protective order, the government intends to file a motion for leave to file under seal that attaches an unredacted copy of the motion and an appendix and proposed redacted versions to be filed later on the public docket at the court's discretion. Because of the extensive and time-consuming logistics involved in finalizing the brief, appendix, and proposed redacted public versions of the same, the government respectfully requests the court's decision on this motion as soon as practicable. Voila! Marcy concludes, no emergency. But without creating such an emergency, then Chutkan will get to look at the argument. I honestly have no idea how it'll end up. I've been racking my brain for what procedural reason Trump's team could use to declare an emergency, but with this SCOTUS, it doesn't have to be all that plausible. That's true. In fact, they don't have to provide any reasoning at all. You could just remember that. Trump files a motion to have them declare a emergency of some kind and initiate an emergency review of the case as it now stands. And if they say, 5 of them say, yeah, it's an emergency, or maybe even 4 of them just to accept the motion. I don't know how that would work exactly. But if enough of them say, there's an emergency, and everybody says, what's the emergency? And they say, I'll tell you later. That's all it takes. They order the removal of the case, they grab it, and then they say, and we're not going to touch it until after the election. That's all it would take. I mentioned that there was something I wanted to read to you that is elsewhere in Pocket, and I'm going to have to do some digging for it. By the way, while I'm doing it, I can tell you, live and in almost real time, we can welcome a new Patreon sponsor, Jim Richards, who joins just today. How's that for service? At like 9:30 today. And it's been 10 days since our last new member was added to Patreon. So let's pick up the pace. I don't know. Can I admonish you all to do that? But Jim Richards, welcome as a new sponsor. We appreciate it. And there's a responsive timing. A mere hour after signing up, you are acknowledged on the air. If only I could remember to give everybody such rapid acknowledgement. Now, somewhere in here, in Pocket, under many, many days of news, flotsam and jetsam, is a story that I've been waiting to bring up. There it is. An MSNBC entry from, is it Hayes Brown here? Let's get in and find out. Yeah, Hayes Brown, who writes this. It's an opinion piece, but formulating an excellent point, I think, that's relevant to what we just read. Trump's lawyers had what everybody thought was, I'll add, an unrealistically bold strategy. Just load up the courts with crap, flood the zone, appeal everything, whether it makes sense or not, and then just, boldly go to the U.S. Supreme Court and say, I've invented a new theory of total presidential immunity for everything, both while I was president, after I was president, maybe even before I was president. I should be immune from everything because I was once president. And everybody said, all of that is equally stupid, but even the salvageable part of immunity while you were president immunity for criminal acts? What are you talking about? No, that's not a thing. It can't be a thing. It stands in complete and utter opposition and rejection to a fundamental basic principle of justice in this country. What are you talking about? And then all of a sudden we now have Supreme Court precedent that says, no, not only is it not crazy, but he's exactly right, or at least mostly right. But, in order to not look totally insane, we want fact finders at the trial level to conduct an inquiry to decide whether or not the activities involved comport with our interpretation of this newly invented crock of crap that Trump has handed it to us. Okay, fine. We'll do that inquiry. Oh, wait a minute. No, you won't. That's where we're headed. That's how crazy this whole thing is. But as Hayes Brown is pointing out, it was unprecedented, unrealistically bold. But guess what? It worked. And it's really, really super disturbing and untenable, really, for a constitutional republic that this is happening. But here we are. So let me read you this. The legal team Trump assembled has succeeded in their bid to delay any chance of their client facing accountability back past Election Day. The whole thing we knew from the start. We knew from 2021 when he staged his first coup. Twice impeached, stages a coup, and everybody said, well, he's definitely going to be, one, impeached, or definitely going to, okay, if we can't impeach him. And remember, the Republicans opposed impeachment the second time. Why? Because they said, well, he's not president anymore. You can prosecute him criminally. And then at that point, it was probably pretty ridiculous, but they said, well, Trump will just delay, appeal everything, file every kind of brief that he can, stretch things out, and try to run for president and stretch it past the election. And at some point, you'll say, well, no, it's an election year. Now you can't try him. It may take that long to get to trial with all these pre-trial motions he's filing. Can he delay all of his prosecutions until after the election? This is the next election. This is 2021. Can we delay until late 2024? And he almost succeeded entirely in doing that. There was one criminal case that went through on the state level. It was convicted on 34 counts, but we're not going to be sentencing him until after the election. So, yeah, actually, this kind of worked. It was very difficult to believe in 2020, early 2021, given what he had done. Things for which in most other countries you're just sort of summarily executed after they happen and fail, that he could stretch it out and be litigating this to this point. But here's Hayes Brown's previously collected thoughts on this. I'm disappointed in my legal talent. I'll be honest with you. Now, it's not me talking. It's not Hayes Brown. It's Donald Trump. It's in his voice. I'm disappointed in my legal talent. I'll be honest with you. Former President Donald Trump told reporters gathered in the lobby of Trump Tower last Friday afternoon, 2 Fridays ago. I guess this is a September 8th article. So several Fridays ago. A phalanx of those very lawyers stood awkwardly behind him, because he was criticizing them, as he reminded the assembled journalists about his many legal troubles. But that was before the New York judge who oversaw the criminal trial that resulted in 34 felony convictions for Trump announced that sentencing won't happen before November 26th. With that decision from Judge Juan Merchan, it's hard to deny that Trump's lawyers have pulled off a massive feat. The strategy they have pursued over the course of the last year, really over the course of the last 4, one that has played out in 4 cases that spanned across the country, has been successful. There will be no criminal accountability for Trump before Election Day. That is kind of astonishing, isn't it? Wouldn't that have caught you by surprise, at least some of you, in January of 2021? Okay. Things played out in Trump's favor in ways that would have been hard to imagine, let's say, as the indictments rolled in. Even though the indictments took years to roll in. Even with him being convicted of those 34 counts of falsifying business records in May, this year has still gone better than expected for him. He should be in prison. Yeah? In December, it looked like Trump would spend this year stuck in courtrooms instead of on the campaign trail. But while the 78-year-old nominee isn't hustling between rallies, and he is never hustling like he used to, it's not because he's stuck in one criminal trial after another. At times it feels like that's despite, not because of Trump's orders to his lawyers. Those who stuck by him have followed his lead and made the most maximalist, overtly political arguments possible, whether they had any chance of success or not. The sheer volume of paperwork that he's had lawyers file in motion after motion has cost millions of dollars in legal fees, almost all of which has been paid by donors to his political campaign. Many of those legal efforts went nowhere, but just enough of the spaghetti stuck to the wall. One of Trump's many co-defendants first called attention to a romantic relationship Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis had with a special prosecutor, and Trump's attorneys ran with the ball. Willis had wanted to begin the trial against Trump in August, roughly a year after indicting him for attempting to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia, but that relationship was the opportunity Trump's allies seized upon to grind the proceedings to a halt. The appeals court will decide if Willis should stay on the case. That will decide if Willis should stay on the case. Won't hear oral arguments until December. They can't move faster than this? Are you kidding? The idea that there was some heretofore secret absolute immunity from criminal prosecution seemed laughable when Trump's lawyers were first attempting to delay his federal election interference case. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan ruled it out of hand in December, but Trump took it all the way to the Supreme Court, which took its sweet time. After hearing oral arguments in April, by the way, it's interesting that they did take their sweet time in coming up with their stupid ruling, and yet might find that they need to move on an emergency basis inside of 1 week's time this very week. All of a sudden, everything has to move very quickly. They're not even in session, but they might move that quickly. After hearing oral arguments in April, it handed down its ruling that presidents do have absolute immunity for core constitutional duties and presumptive immunity for official acts. On July 1st, the last day of this year's term, Chutkan finally has the case back, but she released the scheduling order on Thursday that made clear that pretrial briefings on the new stuff will extend well past the election. And in Florida, U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon has kept a near constant foot on the brakes in Trump's federal classified documents trial, once seen as the most open and shut of the cases against him, as Cannon granted even the most absurd motions from Trump's team full hearings. Right? Her calendar became choked, and the case slipped further and further down the calendar. And then in July, she dismissed the case entirely based on the out-of-left-field premise that Attorney General Merrick Garland improperly appointed Special Counsel Jack Smith to his role. Yeah, that old sack of crap. The Justice Department is appealing that decision, but there won't be any resolution soon. For people clinging to the hope that they'd see Trump sentenced before Election Day, Judge Merchan put the final nail in that coffin when he agreed to a request from Trump's lawyers to postpone the sentencing scheduled then for September 18th. He's due now. Well, at that point, he was due, but I guess he's gotten past it to issue a ruling on September 20th on whether the Supreme Court's immunity case should affect the jury's decision to convict, and the delay will allow time for any potential appeal to be filed before Trump's sentence is handed down. Merchan wrote in his decision that hitting pause is important to avoid any appearance, however unwarranted, that the proceeding has been affected by or seeks to affect the approaching presidential election. The decision to pause his sentencing does affect the election, though. There's only one thing that could potentially bring this string of victories to an end: his losing on Election Day. Trump's legal strategy is to return to the White House next year. From the Oval Office, he would be able to order his Attorney General, of course, to drop all federal charges against him or pardon himself. He'd also have the aegis of the presidency to shield him from further legal action from Georgia or New York. 4 years of justice delayed is riding on whether he defeats Kamala Harris, and Merchan's decision not to sentence before the election is hard to see as anything but a boon for him.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I'll sneak in just a little more. Importantly, even Trump losing to Harris doesn't guarantee that he won't be able to keep running the same playbook. Given what we've seen, there's still a likelihood that if he's convicted in those other trials and appeals all the way to the Supreme Court each time, there may be nothing waiting for him at the end. All right, gotta hand it over to justice. We'll see you tomorrow.